Game Boy. Well, actually a Game Boy Advance SP, which I'm showing here because it's the only Game Boy I've actually got, and that's perfectly fine. However, this video will be covering the games I have for the first Game Boy. There's no denying that the original Game Boy was a great system and absolutely deserves all the respect it gets. After all, the sucker lasted until the GameCube was out. However, we also have to keep in mind that it's a great example of technology marching on and there were better options. Remember, the thing has a crude monochrome screen, not to mention needing 4 AA batteries just to turn the damn thing on. In contrast, while it would take a while to get there, you've got a color and backlit screen, a rechargeable battery pack, so you only need an AC adapter for stuff, in addition to being able to play its games. For the record, I never owned an original Game Boy. I did, however, have a Game Boy Color, which was eventually supplanted by a Model 1 Game Boy Advance, which in turn got supplanted by this thing. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to show the games I have for the original Game Boy, to which I've got 14 available. Quite frankly, I've said enough. Let's get them on camera. Donkey Kong. The original arcade Donkey Kong needs no explanation, but this version of the game is really cool because it starts off that way with the original 4 stages, and then fakes you out by being a far bigger puzzle platformer than you realize. With Mario being able to do all sorts of cool tricks and stuff, I would call this a must-have game for the Game Boy. Adventure Island 2. While I'm familiar with the Adventure Island games, this is the only game in the series I've got, and sadly I didn't even get to play it very much. It just is what it is. I do know this cartridge is a bit tough to find and runs around $30 as of recording time. Not much else for me to say otherwise. Castlevania Adventure. This is a pretty subpar game where the only thing I know that makes it stand out from its NES counterparts is the fact you can climb ropes, which is something the other Game Boy Castlevania games would do. Other than that, it runs pretty slow, even by Game Boy standards as far as I'm concerned, and it's one of the cheapest games in my collection, not even being $15 for a cartridge. I would pick this up if you managed to get the other 2 Castlevania games, which, speaking of that, Castlevania 2 Belmont's Revenge. It's been a while since I last played this game, but last I remembered, it was a major improvement over the first Game Boy game. It also helps that it stayed to its linear roots rather than trying to convert Simon's Quest, which, that probably would have been a train wreck. The cartridge runs around $65 to $70 as of recording time, and is not too easy to find, but if you like some different Castlevania stuff that's actually pretty decent, this is certainly one worth a go, not so much Castlevania Adventure. Castlevania Legends. When it comes to Castlevania games, this one is a total outlier. Quite frankly, the only thing this one's really notable for is that it's the first Castlevania game to have a girl as the main character, but other than that, the game has a very late release, March 1998, and as a result, it's one of the most expensive games on the Game Boy. As it is right now, the cartridges run around $175 to $200. My copy is a bit faded on the label, as you can probably see, but I did get it in a bundle with Castlevania Adventure, so that was pretty cool. Regardless, it is a very tough game to find, and I hadn't seen this game since getting this copy. Ninja Gaiden Shadow. Out of all the early Ninja Gaiden games, this one is definitely the easiest, and quite frankly, probably the easiest in the entire series. Though that's probably not surprising considering most Game Boy games are just converting the popular NES titles like the Ninja Gaiden trilogy on the NES, which is what this game is pretty much representing. However, it is a pretty solid game, and as of recording time, cartridges run around $55 to $60. If you like the Ninja Gaiden games, you might like this one, even if it's a bit easier compared to the rest of the series. Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge. Apologies for this section being somewhat yellow. This cartridge is a bit oxidized, and as a result, there's color diffusion for the camera. Anyway, this is effectively a portable conversion of the first Mega Man game, featuring 4 of the 6 Robot Masters and a new enemy after that. Other than that, it's the first Mega Man just on the Game Boy. Is there anything else I need to say about it? Mega Man 2. Much like the first Game Boy game, this is a conversion of the NES Mega Man 2 into a portable cartridge. Not much needs to be said. It's a tad more expensive than the first game, but that's not really saying much. You can still get a cartridge for $20. Mega Man 3. Same shit, different game. The NES 3 is just converted to a Game Boy cartridge for portable play. Although this one is considerably worth more than the first 2 games, probably because it didn't have a million seller release. As a result, this game is a bit more expensive, with a cartridge as of recording time being around $45 to $50. Mega Man 4. I'm sensing a trend with these games. By the way, we're just going to ignore Mega Man and Rush's position in this cover art? Just me noticing? Okay then. What I can't deny, however, is that this is a very tough game to get for the Game Boy. Tellingly, it was the last of the Game Boy Mega Man games I had to get, taking nearly a year after getting the others before I finally found a copy. After getting this copy, however, I would not see it again for many years until just this past September when my usual shop got a copy. As of recording time, the cartridge runs around $125, though don't be surprised if it's hitting $150 at some point. Mega Man 5. Do I really need to say it? Same shit, wait, they actually made something different with this game? Well, damn, I guess I gotta throw that redundancy joke out the window. Yes, believe it or not, this game breaks trends. It is not a conversion of Mega Man 5. Rather, it takes on a new story involving Star Droids, which are mostly named after the planets of the solar system. In addition, it features Tango for the first time, as well as the only appearance of the Mega Arm, which is essentially a rocket fist. And that's pretty cool, you can't tell me otherwise. Nowadays, this game is more known for being one of the most expensive on the Game Boy, which, as of recording time, cartridges command $180 to $200. However, this game is significant to me as this was the first truly rare game I ever got in my collection, which, while I haven't seen the game since, laid the cornerstone for what my collection would be today. Super Mario Land. It's a Super Mario game. Does it really need explaining? Probably not. Let's just look at the box condition. The biggest problem is that bottom left corner having some crushing, which distorts the bottom, and as a result, this thing can't stand freely. There's also some cuts on the top and right sides, but the left side looks fine, and the back looks pretty decent too. Overall, a decent copy. Here's a look inside, featuring the game cartridge, which I always thought it looked weird being a bit fuzzy on the label, but it does work fine and I have completed the game. The instruction manual, which I also thought was weird that it would be flat black. It has some spine wear, but not much else of significance. A Nintendo Power insert, and a Game Boy promotional insert, which is a Metroid 2 poster on the inside, and that's pretty cool. A complete copy of this game runs around $75 as of recording time, so it's not as bad as some of the other earlier Mario games, but it can be a bit tough to find. Final Fantasy Legend. Believe it or not, the Final Fantasy Legend trilogy are not actual Final Fantasy games. Rather, they're the first games in what would be the Saga series in Japan, something North America wouldn't understand until Saga Frontier on the PlayStation. Actually, now that I say that, I think some people would still not recognize them as Saga games in due part to the trilogy having just a single Japanese exclusive remake each, the first game getting on the WonderSwan Color and the other two getting the DS. Another thing to note is that both the Legend trilogy and Adventure had two releases, the original Square release, which you can see I have, and the Sunsoft re-release, which happened in the middle of 1998. I always thought that was kind of weird, so I'm generally looking at the Square version first. My copy has only one notable blemish. Yeah, that scratch right front and center. Oof. Beyond that, the rest of the box actually looks pretty good, and that's honestly pretty cool. I'm glad it looks like this, apart from that scratch. Here's a look inside, featuring the cartridge that I used to play this game for the channel a little while back, which was a glitchy mess. Definitely a trip, that was for sure. This here is actually a poster and map, which I'll show in a separate clip in just a bit. And right here is a whopping 80-page manual for a Game Boy game. That's just ridiculous. You can see a fold right on that very bottom corner, and right on the back here, there is some yellowing on near the spine. No spine wear though, so it is actually a pretty decent copy. Here's a full view of that poster, to which you can see it's a bit bent because these folds really aren't that worn, so I can't really just completely straighten it out. If I flip it on its side right here, this is the map of all four worlds in the game, the continent, ocean, sky, and ruins. A complete copy of the game runs around $100, but if you can get the map with it too, it'll probably fetch around $120 as a recording time. Final Fantasy Adventure. Much like the Legend trilogy actually being Saga games, Final Fantasy Adventure is not a bona fide Final Fantasy game. Rather, it's the first entry in what would become the Mana series, and would itself be remade as Sword of Mana for the Game Boy Advance. Fortunately, not Japan exclusive this time. Now, why my copy has this weird bluing on front is beyond me. I just bought it this way, thinking I'd probably not be able to get this game complete again, and sure enough, I haven't seen it since, so I can't really complain. It is a box, even though it should be this dark green. The only other fault is this left side, which has a very noticeable scratch up there, and a little crushing on the bottom. The rest of the sides, however, actually look pretty good, so it is a decent looking box apart from the front looking screwed up. Fortunately, the insides aren't screwed up, featuring a very clean cartridge with no faults whatsoever, a very nice and glossy copy, and that makes me happy. This here is a map and chart, which you'll see in full next clip, the Nintendo Power insert, and a likewise Also, 80-page manual, which is very nice and thick. Only a few faults on the front page with this little spot and this little mark right here, but no spine wear and no yellowing on the back page either. A very nice looking manual and an overall excellent copy. And there is the World of Final Fantasy Adventure, featuring not really a lot of wear from the folds at all, so I can't really straighten this out either. If I flip this on its side right here, this is a complete chart featuring weapons, armor, spells, and all sorts of cool stuff. A complete copy of Final Fantasy Adventure was running around $110 to $120, but since the start of the year has jumped up significantly to around $180. I assume with the map it'll probably fetch about 200, so be on the lookout for this, and hopefully you can find it while it's still in its lower price range. And that is my collection of original Game Boy games as of this video's upload date. A small but certainly vibrant collection, but it has been a serious challenge trying to upgrade it into anything significant, so that's why I've only got 14, despite having some really good titles. I'll end this with my top 5 targets for the Game Boy, some of which are games I used to have, but I'd love to be able to try to get them again. My top priority for the original Game Boy is Final Fantasy Legend 2, with Legend 3 being paired with it. You see, I used to own both those games, but my copy of 2 mysteriously vanished on a trip I took in September 2021. Since I had just a cartridge of 2 and 3, I eventually sold my copy of 3. I'm looking to get those both complete and square releases since they all will match, and that would be pretty nice. My second priority is Kirby's Dream Land 2. I used to have the first game, and that shouldn't be too hard to find. I've never actually played the second game, so I'm hoping to get that one, and if both of them are there, the second one will certainly take priority since it's more expensive and much harder to get my hands on. My third priority is Operation Contra, paired with Contra the Alien Wars. It's not really a surprise that Contra was a very popular NES game, so it got some Game Boy games. I've never actually played either game, so I'm looking to get either one of them and see what they're like. I know Alien Wars is much tougher to get though. Fourth on that list is Gradius Interstellar Assault. I do know there's a game called Nemesis that I did have before, but I don't think I've ever seen the Gradius game that got on Game Boy, so I'm hoping to get that and see what that's like, especially since I don't have a shoot 'em up on the Game Boy, and I do like my shoot 'em ups. And rounding out the top 5 is probably a weird call, but Mario's Picross. This just seems like a complete outlier of a game, and I like that kind of stuff. That's why I really don't go after the popular stuff like Pokemon and some of the other Mario games I need to go after, and more just the weird stuff like this one. I've never actually seen Mario's Picross, which is probably why I'm most interested in it, just to kind of see what that's like. Of course, there are some other games on the original Game Boy I like to pick off, but if I find them, I find them. One of my other concerns is trying to get some of my loose Game Boy games boxed, but that is a significant challenge compared to some other systems. And that's all I've got to say and show. If you liked what you saw, feel free to drop a like. If you're interested in seeing how I update the collection, hit that subscribe button. But until then, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.